Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling, well, a huge chunk of human history. We're looking at the 10,000 years from 10,000 BC all the way to 1 AD.
Yeah, it's a massive period. Think about it. We go from nomadic hunter-gatherers, always on the move,
Yeah.
to the first settled agricultural communities, and then boom, the rise of these incredible early civilizations.
Exactly. It's the story of how we fundamentally changed our relationship with the planet and each other. And our mission today for you listening is to really unpack this vast era. We want to make it clear, engaging, something a historian can appreciate, but also simple enough that, even a 5-year-old could grasp the core ideas.
Right. We'll be using analogies, trying to simplify without losing the accuracy. We'll still use the precise terms, but explain them. Think of it as getting the big picture and the key details all at once.
And to do this, we've drawn on quite a range of sources, historical texts giving us narratives, archaeological timelines mapping out the physical evidence, and broader encyclopedic entries that help tie it all together.
So the goal is really to pull out the most crucial transformations, those key innovations that were game changers, and also to see how things were connected, how developments in one place might have rippled outwards or how similar ideas popped up independently.
We want you to walk away feeling like you've got a real handle on this foundational time. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Around 10,000 to 8,000 BC, the Ice Age is ending. What did the world actually look like?
Well, it was changing dramatically. The last big freeze, the glacial period, ended around 8,000 BCE. This kicked off a major warming trend. We call this the start of the Holocene epoch, beginning around 9,700 BC.
Okay.
So you've got ice sheets melting, sea levels rising pretty significantly, and weather patterns shifting all over the globe. Imagine like a giant global thermostat getting turned up. Coastlines look totally different.
And that must have had a huge impact on the animals people relied on, right?
Yeah.
The big ones.
Oh, absolutely. This is when we see the end of the line for a lot of the megafauna, those giant Ice Age animals. In the Americas, you lose things like the giant short-faced bear, the giant ground sloth around 9,000 BC. Horses actually went extinct in North America then.
Wow, I didn't know that about horses.
Yeah. And in Eurasia, say goodbye to the woolly rhino, the Irish elk, the cave bear, the cave lion. Mammoths mostly vanished from the mainland continents too, though some isolated populations clung on for a while longer.
It's like their whole world changed too fast. Like if your favorite playground suddenly lost all the best equipment and you just couldn't play there anymore.
That's a great analogy. The environment changed, and their food sources, their habitats, they just couldn't adapt quickly enough in many cases.
So with the climate warming and the big game disappearing, how did humans start to adapt? What changed for them?
Well, we start seeing some really interesting shifts. Even before farming really took hold everywhere, some groups began to settle down more. Take Jericho, for instance. There's evidence of people living there continuously way back to 9600 BC.
That far back.
Yeah. It seems to have been a popular spot for hunter-gatherer groups called the Natufians. They left behind these distinctive tools, tiny crescent-shaped stone blades.
What were those for?
They're called microliths. Think of them as small, sharp stone flakes that could be fitted into handles made of bone or wood, made for much more efficient knives, spear points, arrowheads.
Okay, so refining their toolkit.
Exactly. Better tools for hunting smaller game or processing plants more effectively.
So some people are starting to stay put more, even before they're actually farming fields.
Precisely. This period, roughly 30,000 to 8,000 BC, is often called the Mesolithic or Middle Stone Age. It's characterized by these smaller, more refined stone tools. Polished stone tools also appear, but, and this is crucial, not everyone settled down. Many groups remain nomadic.
Right.
They continue to follow animal herds, gather wild plants, maybe camping near rivers or lakes. It wasn't a uniform shift.
So different strategies for different groups in different places.
Exactly. Look at North America. The Paleo-Indian lifestyle, established maybe by 12,000 BCE, was still largely nomadic. They were hunting those now extinct megafauna, gathering plants, living in pretty simple temporary shelters.
So a real patchwork response to this changing world.
A patchwork is a perfect way to put it. Humans were experimenting, adapting in diverse ways.
Okay, so the world's warming up, the giant animals are mostly gone, some people are settling, others are still roaming. Then comes what we call the Neolithic Revolution, the dawn of agriculture. This feels like a huge turning point.
It's monumental.
Yeah.
Absolutely fundamental. The Neolithic Revolution, roughly 8,000 to 3,000 BC, marks this big shift towards settled farming communities. The analogy we often use is, instead of constantly moving around to find food, like foraging in a giant forest, You decide to plant a garden in one spot and stay there to tend it, water it, harvest it.
And raise animals there too, presumably.
Exactly. Domesticating animals goes hand in hand with domesticating plants in many places. It completely changes the human relationship with the environment.
And the place this really seems to have kicked off first is the Fertile Crescent in the Middle East.
Right, that's the earliest center we know of, yes.
Yeah.
Wheat domestication might have started there as early as 10,000 BCE. By 8,000, 7,000 BC, you've got established cultivation of barley and wheat in northern Mesopotamia. Farming and animal domestication, sheep, goats, cattle, pigs, really took root around 9,500 BC. And by about 10,200 BC, you see what archaeologists call fully developed Neolithic cultures there. Settled farming life.
Why there? What was special about the Fertile Crescent?
It was kind of a perfect storm. Firstly, the wild ancestors of many key crops like wheat and barley were native to that region. They were already growing there wild.
Ah, okay, so the raw materials were handy.
Precisely. The climate was also suitable. And you already had these early semi-sedentary communities like Jericho, providing a stable base where people could experiment with cultivation over generations.
But it wasn't just the Fertile Crescent, was it? This idea of farming, it seems to have popped up elsewhere independently.
That's such a critical point. It wasn't a single light bulb moment that just spread out. Agriculture developed independently in several parts of the world. In Asia, for instance, China and New Guinea saw agriculture emerge around 7,000 BCE, generally a bit later. You get farming villages in China by around 4,500 BC. And crucially, they domesticated different things. Rice becomes the staple in China, taro in New Guinea, suited to their local conditions.
So different solutions to the same basic need a reliable food source.
Exactly. It shows incredible human ingenuity happening in parallel across the globe.
What about Africa? How did agriculture develop there?
Africa had its own unique trajectory. Interestingly, in sub-Saharan Africa, pastoralism herding animals actually seems to predate large-scale crop farming in many areas. This might have started in North Africa around 8,000 years ago and spread south.
Herding before farming.
Seems like it in some regions. The Ethiopian highlands were also an independent center, domesticating local crops like teff and enset. Crop cultivation generally came a bit later to sub-Saharan Africa compared to the Fertile Crescent. Maybe the long coevolution with local animals made domestication trickier, but that's still debated.
In the Americas, they were completely isolated, so it must have been independent there, too.
Absolutely. Totally independent. And very early in some cases. Cassava, down in the southwestern Amazon, might have been domesticated between 8,900 and 8,300 BC.
Wow, even earlier than wheat in some timelines.
Potentially, yes. It's considered one of the first New World domesticants. Squash and certain trees followed. Central Mexico saw plant cultivation starting around 9,000 BCE. Corn or maize cultivation began spreading in the southwest U.S. around 3,000 BCE. And these early farming societies often grew out of existing hunter-gatherer traditions, gradually adding cultivated foods to their diet until things like corn became central, maybe around 500 BC in the southwest.
So the shift to farming, it wasn't just about food. It had these massive ripple effects, didn't it?
Oh, profound effects. First, people became much more sedentary. You have to stay near your fields and animals. Second, you could generally produce more food than you immediately needed a surplus.
Right, which allows for more people.
Exactly. Population growth and larger settlements. Villages grow into towns. And that surplus does something else crucial. It frees up some people from having to farm all day, every day.
Ah, specialization.
Precisely. You start getting artisans, weavers, potters, tool makers, warriors for defense, priests to manage rituals, administrators to organize things, roles that just weren't feasible when everyone was constantly focused on finding the next meal.
So this lays the groundwork for more complex societies, for civilization itself.
It's the absolute foundation. Without that agricultural base, the rise of cities and complex civilizations is almost impossible to imagine.
Which takes us neatly into that next big phase, the rise of these early civilizations, kicking off around 3,500 BC. How does farming directly lead to cities and states?
Well, the food surplus and the larger settled populations create the conditions. You get urban centers, lots of people living close together. This requires more complex social organization rules, leaders, ways to manage resources.
Different jobs, different social levels.
Right. And often, crucially, you see the development of writing, essential for keeping track of things, for laws, for administration. Plus, new technologies emerge to support it all.
Mesopotamia, the land between the Tigris and Euphrates, is always called the cradle of civilization. Why there?
It saw the world's first true cities emerge by the 31st century BC. Places like Uruk, Kish, Eridu became major centers. Before that, the Ubaid period, say 6500, 3800 BC, had farming villages, but not this urban scale. It's really in the Sumerian civilization, especially the Uruk period around 4000 through 100 BC, that things explode. You get massive cities, and critically, cuneiform writing appears around 3000 BC.
Cuneiform wedge-shaped marks on clay tablets.
That's the one. Imagine pressing reeds into wet clay. They used it for everything, tracking grain, writing laws like the Code of Hammurabi later on, even the earliest known literature, like the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Writing. It's such a leap. It's like sending a message through time, isn't it? Leaving a permanent record.
Absolutely, like a note in a bottle, but much more reliable. It transforms how knowledge is stored and transmitted. And the Sumerians didn't stop there. They're credited with inventing the wheel, huge for transport and farming, and developing a base 60 number system.
Base 60.
Yeah, which is why we still have 60 seconds in a minute and 60 minutes in an hour today. Incredible legacy.
And just next door, geographically speaking, you have ancient Egypt rising along the Nile.
Yes, fueled by the predictable flooding of the Nile, which created incredibly fertile land. Memphis was a major city by the 31st century BC. Around the same time, Egypt was unified under its first pharaoh, traditionally called Mennos. And Egyptian civilization lasted for over 3,000 years. Think of the pyramid's staggering feats of organization and engineering.
And mummification, hieroglyphs.
Right. Complex beliefs about the afterlife led to mummification. Their hieroglyphic script was beautiful and functional. They made huge advances in agriculture, medicine, math. They figured out things like using inclined planes for construction, the screw pump for irrigation, developed papyrus for writing, mastered mass pottery production. Really sophisticated stuff.
Okay, moving eastwards, we get to the Indus Valley. A bit more mysterious, maybe.
Definitely more mysterious in some ways, largely because we can't read their script.
Oh.
The Indus Valley civilization flourished around 2600 BC in modern-day Pakistan and northwest India. Cities like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa are stunning. They had planned layouts, streets on a grid, standardized bricks.
Planned cities that early.
Yeah, incredibly advanced. And get this, sophisticated sanitation systems. Closed gutters, public baths, even evidence of household plumbing.
Wow, that implies a very organized society.
Highly organized, yes, and technologically adept. The undeciphered Indus script is tantalizing. If we could read it, we'd know so much more.
And then further east again, China, along the Yellow and Yangtze rivers.
Yes. The foundations of Chinese civilization were laid along those rivers, starting around 5000 BC. The Shang dynasty, around 1600 BC, is often seen as the real dawn of historically recorded Chinese civilization. They had a developed writing system. You see it on oracle bones used for divination.
Trying to tell the future.
Sort of, yeah. They built walled cities, were masters of bronze casting, used horse-drawn chariots. They also made early advances like the decimal system, the abacus, the sundial, and started building major defensive walls, early precursors to the Great Wall.
So, while these massive civilizations are booming in the East and Near East, what's happening over in Europe and the Mediterranean around, say, 3000 BC onwards?
Things were definitely happening, though maybe not empires on the same scale initially. On Crete, you get the Minoan civilization emerging around the 27th century BC. They were seafaring people, traders. Reached their peak around 1700 BC, built amazing palaces like Knossos, famous for their vibrant frescoes. They had their own script too, Linear A, which is also undeciphered.
And then the Mycenaeans took over or came after, on mainland Greece.
The Mycenaeans flourished on the mainland from about 1600 to 1100 BC. They were more militaristic, built these massive fortified citadels, Mycenae, Pyrrhons. They adopted a script called Linear B, which thankfully we can read. It turned out to be an early form of Greek.
But then things fell apart for a while. The Greek Dark Age.
Yeah, after the Mycenaean collapse around 1100 BC, Greece entered a period of decline, fewer large settlements, loss of writing. But out of this, starting around the 8th century BCE, emerges something new and incredibly influential. The polis, the city-state.
Athens, Sparta.
Exactly. Independent cities, each controlling its surrounding territory. They became the centers of political, economic, cultural, and religious life.
And Athens famously develops democracy.
Right. In the late 6th century BC, leaders like Cleisthenes pushed reforms leading to democratia power to the citizens, or at least the free male citizens. It was revolutionary. Greece became this explosion of philosophy, art, political experimentation. Its legacy is just immense.
And over in Italy, before Rome really takes off, you have the Etruscans.
Yes. The Etruscans were dominant in central Italy from around the 6th century BCE. They had city-states too, influenced early Rome heavily. Skilled metalworkers, great artists and architects, many Roman customs like gladiatorial combat or certain symbols of power seem to have Etruscan origins.
And then comes Rome. First Republic.
Established 509 BCE, supposedly after overthrowing their kings. The Republic gradually, through military might, came to dominate Italy and then much of the Mediterranean. Their constitution was a complex mix elements of monarchy, consuls, aristocracy, senate, democracy assemblies,
And then the Empire.
transitioning around 27 BCE with Augustus. The empire brought the Pax Romana a long period of relative peace and stability. This allowed trade to flourish, ideas to spread. Roman law, culture, language, and especially engineering spread across a vast area.
Roads, aqueducts.
Incredible engineers. Their roads connected the empire. Aqueducts brought fresh water for hundreds of miles. Grand public buildings, often built using their revolutionary Roman concrete, which was incredibly strong and durable.
It's easy to focus just on Eurasia and North Africa. What about the Americas during this time? We know agriculture started independently, but did complex societies also arise?
Oh, absolutely. Completely separate development, but no less complex or impressive in many ways.
Yeah.
In Mesoamerica, you have the Olmec, often called the mother culture, emerging around 1500 BC in the Gulf Coast region of Mexico. They left behind those amazing colossal stone heads, huge basalt carvings, probably portraits of rulers.
Right, I've seen pictures. They're massive.
Yeah. And their art style, their religious ideas like jaguar motifs, maybe early forms of pyramid building influenced later peoples like the Maya and Aztecs profoundly.
Any other major players in the Americas then?
Definitely. Down in Peru, the Corral or Norte Chico civilization was building monumental pyramids as early as 3000 BC. Contemporary with Egypt's Old Kingdom.
No way. That early.
Yes. Shows complex societies were arising completely independently. Then you have the Zapotec in Oaxaca, Mexico, building the city of Monte Alban around 500-200 BC, with its grand plaza and early hieroglyphic writing. Up in North America, the Adena culture in the Ohio River Valley built large burial mounds and ceremonial earthworks starting around 800 BC. And way up north, around the Bering Strait, the old Bering Sea culture developed really sophisticated tools and techniques for hunting marine mammals, again around 800 BC, adapted perfectly to that Arctic world.
It's amazing. Similar patterns of development, agriculture, settlements, complex societies, monumental building happening independently all over the planet. What about other parts of Africa and Asia during this time, say beyond the big names like Egypt and China?
Plenty going on there, too. South of Egypt, in modern Sudan, you have the Kingdom of Kush. It was a major regional power for over 1,000 years, really hitting its stride in the second millennium BC. They had a close, sometimes competitive relationship with Egypt, built pyramids, adopted some customs, but were definitely their own distinct culture. Became fully independent around 1000 BC.
Then Southeast Asia.
Southeast Asia saw villages evolving into more complex, settled cultures, often with social hierarchies and centralized leadership emerging by the middle of this period. The Dongsan culture, particularly in northern Vietnam from about 500 BC to 300 AD, is famous for its incredible bronze drums. These drums are found quite widely, suggesting lots of trade and interaction.
Bronze drums.
Mhm.
Interesting.
Yeah, beautifully decorated. And you see Indian influence coming in too, like early writing systems based on Sanskrit appearing in places like Cambodia.
Yeah.
And remember, people like the Hoabinhian settlers were in the region way, way earlier, like 10,000 years ago.
What about Japan?
Japan during most of this period was in the Jomon period, roughly 10,000 to 300 BC. Primarily hunter-gatherers, known for their very distinctive rope-patterned pottery, lived in tribal or clan groups. Then around 300 BC, the Yayoi period begins. This brings big changes, likely introduced from mainland Asia, maybe Korea or China. Rice cultivation arrives. Metalworking, bronze and iron. The potter's wheel. This leads to more settled agricultural life and the formation of small political units, laying the groundwork for later Japanese states.
Okay, so across the board, alongside societies changing, technology was obviously advancing massively. Let's recap some of the key tech shifts.
Right. So the overarching Stone Age lasts until roughly 5,000 years ago. But within that, you have phases. The Mesolithic, say 10,000, 4,000 BC, we mentioned microliths, but also huge things like the wheel and axle eventually appear. Stone adds this for woodworking, better fishing gear, the bow and arrow a game changer for hunting.
The sail, too, you mentioned.
Yes, the sail for boats, plus more sophisticated leatherworking, basketry, and the sickle for harvesting grains more efficiently.
Then the Neolithic, 4,000, 2,300 BC.
That's when you get more permanent houses, mud brick, maybe stone blocks. Polished stone tools become common, pottery gets much better. Crucially, spinning and weaving developed for making textiles. And plows, first wooden or stone, make farming more productive.
And we shouldn't forget the really early stuff, like controlling fire way back in the Paleolithic and those first basic stone tools. Foundational.
Absolutely foundational. Control of fire changed everything. Cooking, warmth, protection, tool making.
But then you get those truly transformative inventions later on, writing and metals.
Yes. Writing, appearing around 3000 BC independently in Sumer in Egypt. It's hard to overestimate its impact. Record-keeping, administration, laws, literature, history. It changes the scale of what society can achieve.
Yeah.
And metallurgy. The Bronze Age, starting maybe 2300 BC in the Near East, gives you stronger, more durable tools and weapons by alloying copper and tin.
Then the Iron Age.
Kicking off around 700 BC in many places, though maybe earlier in others, like West Africa, where iron smelting might go back to 2000 BC. Iron is harder, more common than the components of bronze, leading to another technological leap. Tools, farming implements, weapons, all get better.
And these metal technologies spread, right, like bronze reaching Southeast Asia later on.
Exactly. Bronze seems to arrive in Southeast Asia around 1500-500 BC, followed by iron around 1000 BC. Technology diffusion and independent invention working together.
And all this tech feeds into engineering and architecture, too.
For sure. The Mesopotamian wheel, Egyptian inclined planes and screw pumps for their massive projects, the incredible city planning and sanitation of the Indus Valley, and later Roman concrete, enabling them to buoy those arches, domes, aqueducts, and roads that lasted centuries. Truly impressive stuff.
So looking back over this incredible sweep of 10,000 years, what are the absolute key takeaways, the big transformations?
Well, first you have the massive environmental shift at the end of the Ice Age. That really set the stage, forcing adaptation. Second, the Neolithic Revolution to shift to agriculture. It happened independently in multiple places and utterly changed the human story, allowing for settled life and population growth. Third, agriculture directly enabled the rise of complex societies and the first civilizations, Mesopotamia, Egypt, Indus, China, and parallel developments elsewhere. And fourth, you see these unique trajectories unfolding across the globe in the Mediterranean with Greece and Rome, independently in the Americas and other parts of Africa and Asia. It's not one single story, but many interconnected ones.
And that interconnectedness feels key, too. How climate change spurs adaptation, farming allows complexity, technology fuels more change.
Absolutely. One thing leads to another, often in unexpected ways. Environmental pressure, human ingenuity, social organization, technological innovation, they're all constantly interacting and shaping the path forward. It really shows how small changes, or big ones like agriculture, can ripple outwards and have consequences that echo down through millennia.
It's truly mind-boggling when you stop and think about it. How many things we take for granted today, living in communities, farming, writing, laws, technology, even political ideas like democracy, have their roots planted firmly in this incredibly ancient period.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? And maybe that leads to a final thought for you, listening at home. Considering everything we've touched on the end of the Ice Age, the invention of farming, the rise of cities, writing, metallurgy, empires. What single development from this vast era, from 10,000 BC to 1 AD, do you personally think had the most profound, the most far-reaching consequences for the future of humanity, and why?
Was it taming fire, planting that first seed, scratching that first symbol onto clay, building that first city wall? Something else entirely.
Yeah, it's a great question to ponder. What was the biggest turning point in those 10 millennia? We encourage you to think about it, maybe do a little digging yourself, and reflect on the incredible enduring legacy of this foundational time.